A Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone. Now, we all like our challenges, don't we? For some people, it's doing their first 5K, doing their first 10, or doing the elusive marathon. But for Dan, who's joining us today, it's doing 50 events in a year. So welcome, Dan. And before we go into sort of too much detail, tell us when you started running and what got you going in the first place.
Yeah. So firstly, thanks, Tim, for having me and giving me the opportunity to share the craziness of the last year. I've always been a runner. I ran at school. I ran for my district, and then that kind of tailed off as I went through university and things like that. I really got back into it around 2010. So my youngest daughter was around 5. She was born with Down syndrome, and at the time, one, I wanted a challenge, and two, an opportunity to give back. And at that time, it was with the Down Syndrome Association. They offered me a place to run in the marathon. And from there, the rest is history. And here we are today, a little wiser, maybe not as fitter, maybe fitter, I don't know, but certainly still loving what I'm doing.
Great. And what was the catalyst for this massive challenge that you've undertaken? And give us some detail of exactly what that challenge entailed.
Yeah, sure. So I turned the ripe old age of 50 this year in August, and I wanted to do something a little bit different rather than just running a marathon and fundraising. I wanted to create a bit of a cause and a bit of a journey, both for myself, but also for Phab, who I ran for. So firstly, Phab has been part of our lives for probably the last 6-7 years. As I say, my daughter has Down syndrome, and what Phab allowed us the opportunity and her the opportunity was to gain a little bit more independence away from us as well. Yeah, we're great at support, but also she just needs to learn to kind of live and cope on her own 2 feet to a certain degree. So, and that's what Phab gave her the opportunity to go away without us, and she absolutely loved it, and she's thrived on it. And since then, Phab has just been a regular part of our lives, whether that's my daughter going to their activities, whether that's fundraising, and as part of kind of midlife crisis, I guess you might call it a little bit. I thought do a little bit something different. So I decided to create a challenge, which was kind of 50 races before I turned 50. What I decided to do was kind of bookend it with London 25 and London 26. And in between that, run 48 races. So roughly one a week, a mix of distances. So everything from 5, 10s, halves and marathons, both on road and on trail. So really mixed it up. In some cases, I did more than one a week, which actually in the latter part of the challenge, and particularly leading up to London, gave me some time to rest.
I can't imagine there was a huge amount of rest, was there, during that period? So just talk us through some of the events that you did and some of your favourites in that year.
Yeah, what was really interesting is, that locally there's a few 10Ks. Where I live, there's a series of 10Ks. So there's kind of a number of races through the year where I could say, okay, I can do those because I know of them. I think what was a big challenge was finding a race every week. And very quickly, I realized there wouldn't be a running race every week on the road, but actually trail could be a really good option. So it taught me to run on a different service, which is great. And anyone who's not done trail before, recommend it. It's a different experience. It uses different muscles in your legs, but it's great. I thoroughly enjoy it. So there's a challenge finding races, but I did a lot of research. And actually what I found was there's a lot more out there than I thought. I had to be really sensible in terms of distance as well, because doing a half or a marathon every week was not going to be a sensible approach, particularly because they were so regular. So, between my coach at my running club and I, we just found sensible races through the year. Some we would call our A races. So there'd be the ones that, we would kind of set a target and go hard on, when others were, in all seriousness, were kind of training races. They were part of my training plan. So we had to be really clever. In terms of some of my favorites, I found a great organization that does 10K trail races around local microbreweries called Ale and Trails, and I fully recommend them. So you get to run 10K, and at the end you get a wonderful little pint glass and a medal, and you can try their local beer or ale afterwards, and it's very sociable. So, I very quickly found events where I could join a wider community, which was also good in terms of kind of spreading my message and the things that I was doing. So did a number of those fairly local to me in kind of Windsor and Swindon, that kind of area. So some great places around there. I found some very obscure ones. There's a wonderful one called the Martian Race in Woking, which is a 10K, and it runs through a bit of kind of sandbank where War of the Worlds was written. So again, got a wonderful medal of a little alien. But actually, some of the best races were the ones where I signed up quite late because I got quite desperate to find races in the back end. So there's a great organisation called Phoenix Racing and Saturn Racing, which do regular 5, 10 halves and marathons. So you can turn up early in the morning and you just run. You run the distance you want to run and you get a medal. And some of those were, again, great atmosphere, great people. So yeah, a real mix. And then London, right? London is an experience. And it's an experience that, this was my 8th time, and it was just as awesome as my first time.
There's always something new to see on the London course, isn't there? You don't realise when you do it for the first time, you think you've seen everything, but as you
Yeah.
keep going back, there's something else that you missed the first time or the 5th time or the 6th time. It's absolutely incredible. I can't imagine how hard it must have been logistically putting that schedule together. When did you start all the planning?
So probably the October of 24. That's when it really started to gain momentum, and I thought, well, I'll go for this. This has some legs on it, so to speak. So as I say, I mapped out the year, and there were definitely races I wanted to do and races I knew of. So it was very easy to slot those in. And then it was a case of just researching what was available each weekend. So there are races, again, fairly local to me near Windsor, which is Dorney Lake. They have something on most weekends. So it was great to say, well, if I can't find a race, there is an alternative. Logistically, yeah, a real challenge. My wife would definitely agree with the logistics part of it. But I tried to find things as local as I could that would minimize the amount of time I was kind of out of the house or away. So, luckily as well, a lot of these races start at 8:30, 9 in the morning. So I could be home by 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So again, it was just being conscious that life has to go on around me, and I have a family that I also have to be here and support. But fortunately, they were, very supportive, even through gritted teeth at times, I think, fully on board with what I was trying to do. But also I had really good friends, both, outside of my running club and in my running club, who joined me on a lot of these things. So they also came on the journey with me, which was great. Again, I didn't ask them to, they wanted to share and run with me, which was great.
I think it's interesting you said before that you've sort of discovered some races that you didn't know existed. I think, everybody obviously has heard of the London Marathon and Manchester and Brighton and some of the other big ones, but there are
Yeah.
so many events out there that need our support where there might only be 2 or 300 runners, and it's really
Mm.
difficult for these guys to put the race on. And when you see, the ballots being entered by, 1.3 million people, which is just phenomenal. But there's all these races around the country that really do need our support. And when you're pushed to try and find something, you look hard, don't you? And you
Yeah.
you sound like you've found some absolute gems there. The brewery ones sound particularly interesting, don't they? For sure.
Yeah.
How many of those did you do?
I think I've done 5 in total in different locations. And they seriously are, and we, running as a community can be as serious as you want it to be. And I think there is nothing, and I found this over the year, the running community is brilliant. And there's, everyone is there to support you, regardless of whether you're going for a PB on that day or whether you're just going to run, as a training race, or you're just running because you want to run. I think for me, what I found was whichever race I did, there was somebody there who said good luck to me, or at the end shook your hand. And I think That's really nice.
And your training then was dictated by the race that you had coming up that weekend, presumably. It must have been, again, very hard logistically to plan all that out.
Yeah, my coach would 100% agree with you. I think what we did when we went into this was, you know, the objective of this whole thing was to survive and get through 50 races. Yeah, and to start at London and finish at London without too many issues. So I think for him, and also what we agreed as part of that was some of those races are going to have to be part of my training. They can't be on top of it, because life gets in the way and work and all of those things. So I think for him, it was, we almost looked at it in kind of 2-3 week blocks to say, okay, what have we got coming up? Because there'd be weeks where I would do a 10K and then I'd do a half the following week. There were some occasions where, down to bad planning, I would have a half on a Saturday and a 10K on a Sunday. Yeah. Trust me, don't do it. So we kind of had to be really sensible around, okay, your half, because you're perhaps, training for the marathon, we use that as your long run and you go super easy. It's not about time, it's about time on your feet. Where the 10K, we might say, actually, well, let's go a little bit harder on that and let's see how you cope with fatigue in your legs or something like that. So that wasn't common. That was only a few times due to me. But we almost had to take, blocks of weeks at a time to say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to prepare for. We haven't really spoken in detail about this since, but I know through it was like he had to, rejig what I was doing because of a race that I had, or because I was traveling with work, or because I was ill. So I think it certainly challenged him. I just did as I was told.
um, Obviously, you've got London at the start and London at the end. What was it like doing those two marathons, and what were the differences between the two? I mean, obviously, the 25 race was incredibly hot. This
Yeah.
year's was still warm, but not as hot. But what was it like for you both times, having already done the race before? And when we just touched on the fact that there's always something new to see on the day. But what was it like doing those two?
Yeah, I think as you say, you always see something new, whether that's somebody in a daddy pig costume or something like that. It's always entertaining. I think I went into 25 planning, apart from it being my first race, planning it to be the one I wanted to go hard on, the one that I wanted, at a time in mind. Training was indicating all the right things. So for me, I went into that racing. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of prove to myself that I was able to kind of match my training. Unfortunately, the heat was the thing that kind of um, turned that upside down. But what I think I learned from that one was the need and the ability to have to change your plan midway through the race. And I think, again, having that ability to say, I have an A plan, but actually if things just don't go quite right, there's a B and a C. And actually both of those I'll be happy with. So I actually ended up doing a PB in that first marathon on 25. The second one, although I would arguably say fitter and stronger, and because of all the training, all the races, probably physically in a much better place. Number 50 was about just enjoying it. It was just about soaking up the atmosphere. Yes, I had a time in my head because, I'm fairly competitive with myself, but it was never about kind of hitting a particular time. It was about enjoying it, getting round, celebrating that 50. I think probably in that one versus the first one, I spoke to more people, I hugged more people. It was a slower time, but actually I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got to see my family were at certain parts as well, which was amazing. Phab were there as well at certain parts, which was amazing. And I saw people on in the race itself that I knew, which, when you're in your zone, you just go, don't you? Where in this one, I was a lot more aware of my surroundings. I saw parts of London I'm not even convinced I ran in the first time. Yeah, two very different marathons, equally enjoyable, but for very two different reasons.
So what were the highlights then? Obviously, everybody talks about Cutty Sark and Tower Bridge and running along the embankment and Buckingham Palace. What were your key points?
The start was really good. I was for the first time in the pink zone, which again I never knew existed, but I was in the pink wave, and actually there was a lot of people from Phab there as well. So for me, that was really nice to be able to sit and chat to people and kind of talk about the craziness that we're about to go through. So that was really good. I think there were probably three moments for me. Tower Bridge, because I saw Phab at Tower Bridge, where last time I didn't. I ran past them and I stopped and I spoke to them and had hugs with them, and that was amazing. And you know, I was halfway through, so I was like, okay, we're okay. And then just after Canary Wharf, around kind of 19, 20 miles, I saw my family for the second time. But it was at a time when I was probably needing to dig deep and needed a mental boost. So seeing them, and they had t-shirts and flags and everything. So that again, that was probably for me a really great moment. The rest of it I love, right? Running down running down the river towards Big Ben, that's all amazing. But they're the things that have stuck in my mind even a couple of weeks after.
So for most people, it's an incredibly emotional time when you finish that race. But for you, there was a lot more at stake this time, wasn't it? What was that like then when you went down Birdcage Walk and turned past the palace and ran for home? What was that like?
It was emotional, and I'm glad I had glasses on because my eyes were a little bit puffy. It was kind of a kind of accumulation of the final race, and kind of a year of running and training and fundraising and all of those things, but also a bit of a realization that I may not do London again. Watch this space, maybe, I don't know, but it was my eighth time, and I think I'd like to do something a little bit different. So there's a bit of that, will I be back? I made a promise to my wife that I wouldn't. We'll see. But yeah, it was, and it was just, it'd been such a good year, and hard for all the right reasons. But it was just, yeah, it was just an amazing end to it. And I saw my family were there at the end as well in the grandstand. I saw them at the end, where Phab were, where the charity were. And I saw, weirdly, a few people that, as I crossed the line, went, "We follow you on Instagram." And I was like, oh my God, I'm famous. I'll take that. But yeah, it was a tough gig. And I still look back on it now, and it sends a little bit of a tear to my eye. And yeah, it's something I won't forget anytime soon.
No, I can imagine. But the big question, of course, is how are you going to follow it now?
There's things I'm thinking about. I've got an itch, that's for sure. My wife has said I can run more marathons if they're not in London. So for me, I take that as maybe we need to go abroad somewhere. So maybe a Paris or a Barcelona, something like that would be really good. But then again, I'm not necessarily. I don't want to go after the ones that we all know about. I've found that those more obscure ones and ones that perhaps don't have hundreds and thousands of people are actually the ones that are really good. So there's something bubbling.
Right, sounds intriguing. Let's talk a little bit about the fundraising then. I'm really interested how because you'd fundraised for Fab before in your previous marathons, but
Mm.
this is a whole different animal, obviously, over the period of a year. Did you set up one campaign over the year, or did you sort of split it down? How did you go about that?
Yeah, and look, and I'm sure many people have been challenged on this. When you fundraise for a year and then you go into a second year into a race, it is difficult, right? We're in kind of more challenging times, I guess. So kind of going back and asking people for money time and time again gets a bit of a challenge. So what I'd done as part of mapping out the 50 over the year was to look at, what kind of different activities could I do? Yes, it was the general, hey, I'm running 50, please support me. And people were super generous. But also I needed to find ways of people doing something a little bit different, but also perhaps giving back to them as well. So I'm fortunate that I work in the toy industry. So I was able to do raffles. So those type of things have worked really well. Because again, people like to be in the chance of winning something and getting something back. So I did those a few times. I've done things like football cards, so you can pay £2 for a team, and then so much goes to the charity, and then so much goes to the person who wins. So I had to be a little bit more creative this year. I was fortunate that people that I work with and friends and family kind of said to me, look, what we'll do is we'll commit to an X amount of money, but we'll do it over a period of time. So as you go through your challenge, perhaps when you get to halfway, we'll give you another chunk of money. So, again, people were very generous with that, but it's not easy. And I know a lot of people do things like quizzes and, dinner and dances and things like that. And I think, yeah, you have to put on your creative juices to get people to sponsor over and above what they would typically do.
Yeah, I think the days of, just putting it on your social media pages and sort of waiting, they're not gone. Obviously, they work well for some people, but it is all about, you know, giving people something, isn't it? And I think the raffle's a great way of doing it. Events clearly are a really good way as well. But just talk me through in a little bit more detail about those raffles over the year. Then, how many did you do, and what sort of money did you raise from those?
Yeah, so I think I did 3 over the years. So I work for, as you can probably see behind me, I work for Lego. So, I was fortunate that I have people I work with who are very generous in terms of giving sets and things. So, I did a couple of Lego raffles, which, fortunately, people love Lego. So it's a great incentive. And I think I probably raised between 3 and £500 on each of them. And there was enough sets. I think I did one raffle had 20 sets of various pricing, and the other one was 10 or something. So, there was a great opportunity to win. And then the other one I did was, at the time, we were working really closely with Formula One on some projects we were doing, and they were very generous with some merchandising. So again, I used that. So, try to find things that people kind of could relate to, and wanted to investing in the chance of winning something back. So, and again, I think with that one, it was about £200 or £300. So, you know, um, and that was the biggest challenge, right? Is it because it was over a year, I could spread things over a year, but also people could spread things over a year. So it wasn't, I need all your money during this period of time because I need to be able to hit my limit with the charity in order to run. So yeah, it took a little bit of planning to do alongside when the hell am I going to run each race.
Yeah, you had plenty going on, didn't you, over that period? That's for sure.
Yeah,
I think one of the things we talk about quite frequently on these podcasts is the need to run for a cause that means something to you. Now, obviously, your relationship with Phab is very much the cause means a huge amount to you. How important was that during your fundraising, do you think? And compare it hypothetically to, if you've been doing all this for a charity that really you had no relationship with, what's the difference?
yeah. I think it's that emotional connection, isn't it? And I think people can see that in the way that you talk, or you write messages, or how you kind of approach and show who you are. So, you know, we've always been very open about my daughter and her disability and all of those things. It's part of who I am. Um, so, bringing that to the story of why I'm raising for Fab just adds a little bit more kind of emotional connection, and gives a true reason. But I think, if you can find reasons why, it makes it a lot easier, and I think people buy into that, and particularly close friends and family that have seen, us go through 21 years with my daughter and how she's grown and the things that we've been through. I think people relate to that, and again, I think that makes it. I don't know if easy is the right word for people to donate. I think they feel a connection with you, which again I think helps.
No, for sure. Um, Looking back then over the year, there's obviously been a huge amount of highs, and I would imagine the odd low dotted in there as well. What were the absolute highlights for you of that 12 months?
The highlights, I think, one, getting to 25, I think was a highlight, and we got to 25 without any issues really. I think, a few aches and pains here and there, but nothing that stopped us. I'd actually got to 25, and actually had raised most of the money I needed to by that stage. So that's a relief, right? Because then it's one less thing that you need to worry about. After 25 was actually when I got some of my low points, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But 25 was, I got to run with my coach at Bournemouth Half. So again, it was a really nice moment where we both shared kind of going through this training, and him trying to figure out how he kept me fit and on the straight and narrow, and we could celebrate halfway together. So that was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think some of the other races, as I've said, some of those more obscure ones that I found, there's some great experiences. One of the best experiences actually was my 49th run. So I ran, again, it was the Sales and Trails race, fairly local to me. And I was meant to be running with one of my best friends from school who I've known for 40 odd years. And I got there and he messaged me to say his back was playing up and that he wasn't going to run. So I was like, "Ugh, okay, so it's me again on my own." And I suddenly got a phone call from one of the guys I run with saying, "Where are you?" I was like, "I'm sat in my car about to run." He went, "Come out, I'm here, I'm going to run with you." As I got to him, there were 8 other people from the run club had all decided to come and run with me on the day, which was amazing. And then round the course, there were people with signs saying, actually, I've got one of the signs here saying 49 done, 1 to go. So I was like, it was quite an emotional day. And then one of my other best friends who I've known, and we lived together at university as well, rocked up. So 49 was an emotional one, but amazing, absolutely amazing. And we chatted round, and it was, again, there was no time to it. It was just good fun. So that was definitely one of my highlights.
That sounds incredible. And then, of course, going over the finish line in London would have been
Yes.
right up there with those highlights. So let's look at the low points then. Let's link this to things you might have done differently.
I think, I think the lowlights, there's probably only w- one that really sticks out in my mind. I was meant to be doing Farnborough Half back in February, and I'd been doing a lot of traveling with my daughter, taking her to some dance competitions. So I'd been in the car a lot. I got to the race on Sunday, and I was tired. I was physically, mentally shattered. And it was a long old half, and I felt generally miserable about it. Got back home and I messaged my coach and just said, I'm done. I'm so tired. I felt my legs were heavy and things like that. And actually, he said, let's take the week off. Let's do nothing. Ironically, the following week I did a 10-mile and ran my probably best 10 miles I've ever run. So, very quickly we flipped it. But that for me was a moment that sticks in my mind a lot, around knowing when just to take a break. Yeah. And there were moments up to that kind of through the year where it's like, I'm not going to run today because I'm tired. But that was a moment of, and I would say mentally I was quite low because I was so tired. But it was a great example of how we just flipped it and said, right, it doesn't matter. It's all about now getting to the end, getting to race 50, doing the other races, but let's do it in a sensible way. Outside of that, I have to say, touch wood, it was pretty good.
God, that's amazing, isn't it? Given the scale of what you've done, that you really only had that point where you thought, I need a serious rest here. And that is really impressive. And I
Yeah.
think it's something, obviously, we've seen, haven't we, during people's training for the marathon, particularly if it's their first one, there comes a point where you feel almost tied to the training plan, but sometimes you just have to go, no, that's it. I need a bit of time away from all of this.
Yeah.
And generally a week is enough, and people do come back stronger because it is quite intense for people, isn't it? Training
Mm.
for their first marathon in particular when they've not done it before, because, you know, you've done no running and all of a sudden that's all you feel like you are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, advice that I've given to people when, have spoken coming up to this one, that in their first one, is just give yourself a break, right? Just, the only person you're running for is you. No one is going to care whether you're doing 2 hours or 10 hours other than you. So, enjoy it. If you need a break, take a break. You're better to be rested than to rock up on that start line feeling tired or injured, which can happen in some cases. But difficult to say and do those things. But that's certainly what I've learned as well is, take those breaks. Missing one training session is not going to stop you running a marathon.
Yeah, indeed. Have you got any other sort of top tips from your experiences over the years that you could share with people?
Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate.
Mm.
I have various experience of not hydrating, and it's, and it not helping me at all. So I think, and it's not necessarily about hydrating on the way up to a marathon. That's super key, but just keeping yourself hydrated generally if you're training, because you'll see such a difference, and particularly when it's warm. And I think, as you said, last year, 25 was super warm. And I think despite all the hydration that I had, the heat was the thing that kind of just said, Dan, change your plan. So I think hydrate. I think just as I say, give yourself a break. Don't beat yourself up if you miss a training session because you're not very well or you're tired. You'll have plenty of time to get back on and get back on your feet and do that. And I think as well, enjoy the process, as tough as it can be. I think you signed up for it for a reason, whether it's charity or whether it's to get fit or whether it's to prove a point or whatever. Enjoy that process. Know that times will be tough, but it'll be worth it when you get to the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the best things in life take some work, don't they? And,
Yeah,
that feeling of running down to the finish in London, you do that on the back of a lot of hard work, and it wouldn't feel as amazing as it does if you hadn't had to do all that hard work. And I think that's so
yeah.
important.
And it's your victory lap, right? You've done, as you say, you've done all that hard work for 12, 16, 14 weeks, whatever your training plan has been. London is your victory lap. You've done the hard work. Go and enjoy it.
Dan, I really appreciate you joining me. You've done an incredible job. It's one thing I do know, having done a few of these challenges myself, is that you are definitely not finished. And you will feel a big void at the moment, which gives you time for planning. That's the key thing. So, yes, your wife may get a wish that you don't do London too many more times. I'm sure there'll still be one or two.
Maybe.
But maybe she'll get some nice overseas trips and some marathons in places that she might not be aware actually have marathons. But I'm sure there's plenty to come. But
No.
Really, really appreciate your time.
No, and thank you for having me, Tim. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.